The galaxy had been at war for centuries. Battles raged between empires older than human civilization itself. The conflict spanned thousands of light years, fought by species that had long perfected the art of war. And then, the humans arrived. A single transmission spread across the Galactic War Council, sending chills through the most hardened strategists. Human forces have entered the battlefield. Silence. Even the war-hardened generals, beings who had destroyed entire worlds without remorse, paused at those words. Humans? The same primitive species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel? The same creatures that were centuries behind in technology? They should have been irrelevant. A minor species. But the way that message was delivered. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a plea for peace. It was a statement. And the galaxy knew this was about to change everything. Inside a vast war chamber, a dozen alien warlords and admirals gathered, their eyes fixed on the holographic map in the center of the room. Star systems flickered, indicating battles in progress. But one system stood out. A cluster of red markers had appeared, small, insignificant compared to the armadas already engaged in battle. Human forces. A heavy, insectoid general clacked his mandibles. Are we certain? Have the humans truly joined the war? A reptilian admiral hissed in frustration. Yes. Their fleets have arrived at the Colaris front. He waved a clawed hand at the map. A foolish move. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the firepower. They don't have the sense to know when they're beaten, another general interrupted, shaking his head. They're not like us. They fight differently. There was a pause. Fighting differently. That was the part that worried them. They had studied the humans, of course. Every species that reached the stars was observed. Analyzed. Assessed for potential threats. Humans? Their technology was laughable. Their biology was unremarkable. Their homeworld was chaotic, filled with endless conflicts, disasters, and internal struggles. And yet, there was something unsettling. Wars on their planet didn't end with extermination. They didn't conquer just for resources. Their history showed something bizarre, something alien. They fought until the rules changed. That's what made them dangerous. The warlords in the chamber exchanged uneasy glances. They had all seen the same reports. Stories of human endurance. Their ability to adapt, to survive impossible odds. The Colaris front would be the first test. Would the humans be crushed in their first battle, proving they were no different from the thousands of other species that had tried to challenge the galactic order? Or would they do something unthinkable? No one spoke the second possibility aloud. A beeping sound interrupted the silence. The holographic display shifted, showing the first battle reports from Colaris. The room froze. Something had just happened. And the moment the humans entered the war, the galaxy trembled. The battle at Colaris should have been over before it even started. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. A logical analysis of the battlefield suggested a swift and overwhelming defeat. But that's not what happened. Admiral Zalthuan, a veteran of over 1,000 campaigns, watched the live battle feed from his warship. His fleet, composed of battle-hardened cruisers and dreadnoughts, had trapped the human forces in a perfect kill box. A tactical masterpiece. Yet, something was wrong. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't panicking. They were advancing. Zalthuan's four eyes narrowed as he studied their movements. They were breaking every established rule of warfare. Their ships darted through gaps that no sane commander would exploit. They charged directly at enemy formations, only to vanish from sensor locks moments later. And somehow, their losses were minimal. Explain this, Zalthuan growled to his strategist. The smaller officer fidgeted with his control panel, his scales shifting in agitation. They are using an unpredictable maneuver pattern. They're not following standard engagement protocol. Zalthuan clenched his mandibles. then predict it. The strategist's voice trembled. We can't. They change their tactics mid-battle. It's as if they're learning from us in real time. That sent a ripple of unease through the command deck. No species learned like that. Wars were won through superior numbers, better weapons, and overwhelming firepower. Strategy took centuries to refine, passed down from generations of war leaders. No species had ever rewritten the rules of war while fighting it. Yet, that's exactly what the humans were doing. Aboard the UNS Resolute, Captain Doran kept his expression calm as the ship's hull shuddered under enemy fire. His fleet was taking damage. There was no avoiding that. But he wasn't playing for defense. He was playing for the mind of his enemy. The aliens fought with structure. Their fleets moved in precise formations, following battle doctrine that had been tested for thousands of years. It made them predictable. Humans? They didn't fight like that. They fought like wolves. Doran's eyes flicked across the battle map. Rotate fire teams. Pull the second squadron back, let them think we're retreating. The tactical officer nodded. And then? Doran allowed himself a smirk. Then we bite. Back on the enemy flagship, Admiral Zalthuan's claws dug into the command console as red alarms filled the bridge. Human forces have broken through our left flank. Zalthuan's mind reeled. That shouldn't be possible. They were trapped. Where did they find a weak point? Then it hit him. The humans created the weak point. Their retreat had been a trap. Before he could react, a dozen explosions erupted across his fleet. Human strike teams had slipped past their defenses, striking at critical points with surgical precision. For the first time in his long, decorated career, Admiral Zalthuan felt something he never expected. Fear. As the battle raged on, the Galactic War Council watched in silence. They had dismissed humanity as weak. They were wrong. The humans weren't fighting for territory. They weren't fighting for conquest. They were hunting. And the galaxy had just realized they were the prey. Admiral Zalthuan's forces should have been victorious. Every calculation, every tactical model, predicted a decisive alien victory at Colaris. The humans should have been nothing more than another footnote in the long history of galactic warfare. But the reality was far different. His fleet was in chaos. The moment he had thought he understood the humans, they changed again. Their tactics shifted mid-battle, not at a strategic level, but in real time. It was unnatural. It was terrifying. And worst of all? The humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. The Galactic War Council watched the unfolding battle from a secure location deep within their command station. High-ranking officers from multiple species stared at the battle holoscreen in stunned silence. Impossible, one of the warlords muttered. His mandibles clicked in frustration. No fleet that size should be able to withstand an assault like this. And yet, another officer said grimly, they are not just withstanding it. They are dismantling it. The holographic map showed a terrifying pattern. The humans weren't moving randomly. They were evolving. Every failed maneuver from the enemy became a new strategy for the humans. Every weakness exposed was immediately exploited. The humans didn't have superior firepower. They didn't have indestructible warships. What they had was something far worse. They had adaptation. Aboard the UNS Resolute, Captain Doran leaned forward, eyes locked on the battlefield. His fleet was pushing forward, weaving through the alien armada like a knife through soft flesh. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Wren, exhaled sharply. Sir, they're trying to pull their forces back. Looks like they've realized they can't pin us down. Doran's lips curled into a grin. Good. That means they're afraid. Fear. That was the key. Humans had studied war for thousands of years, and one lesson had always remained true: fear breaks armies faster than firepower. Signal our attack wings, Doran ordered. Phase 2 of the plan. Make them think we're overextending. Ren blinked. You want them to chase us? Of course, Doran said, eyes gleaming. We're not fighting for control of Colaris. We're fighting for their confidence. And when they come after us... He gestured at the tactical map, where a hidden squadron of human warships was waiting behind a cluster of asteroid debris. They'll realize too late that we set the trap first. Admiral Zalthuan saw it happening seconds too late. His fleet, desperate to reclaim control of the battle, overextended. The humans lured them in. And now? Now, they were surrounded. Human reinforcements, perfectly timed, emerged from hidden positions, cutting off the alien retreat. The trap snapped shut. Admiral, we must retreat, his second-in-command barked. Our forces are collapsing. Zalthuan's claws trembled as he stared at the screen. This wasn't war. This was predation. And they were the ones being hunted. The Battle of Colaris ended in a way no one had predicted. The humans didn't just win, they changed the entire nature of the war. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans had arrived. And for the first time in history, the galaxy was afraid. The aftermath of Colaris sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It wasn't just that the humans had won. It was how they had won. Entire fleets had been crushed, not by superior firepower, but by something far more insidious, psychological warfare. They hadn't just defeated their enemies. They had broken them. And now, fear was spreading. The Galactic War Council reconvened in a private, heavily fortified chamber. The usual arrogance and certainty were gone, replaced by unease. Warlord Juthan, an amphibious general with decades of battle experience, clicked his claws against the stone table. We need to face reality. The humans are not a typical enemy. They do not fight for honor, for glory, or even for conquest. The others listened in silence. They fight with deception. With terror. They do not engage us in the ways we expect, and that makes them far more dangerous than we realized. Admiral Krell, a reptilian strategist, leaned forward. Explain. Juthan sighed, playing a battle recording from Colaris. The hologram showed a terrifying sequence, human ships appearing and disappearing from enemy sensors, seemingly at random. A fleet pursuing them, only to realize too late that they were being led into a trap. They turned our own strategies against us, Juthan growled. But it's worse than that. Another hologram played. It showed an alien commander's final transmission before surrendering without a fight. A room full of warlords watched, horrified. He surrendered before losing a single ship, one muttered. Juthan nodded grimly. That's the power of fear. They are making us doubt ourselves. They are making our warriors hesitate. And hesitation? Hesitation was death. Meanwhile, on a human warship in deep space, Captain Doran sat calmly in his command chair, studying the latest reports. Looks like it's working, his first officer, Lieutenant Wren, remarked. Doran smirked. Of course it is. The moment an enemy starts questioning their own actions, the battle is already half won. Humans didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with perception. The alien warlords expected humans to come at them with brute force. With overwhelming numbers or superior firepower. Instead, humans fought like ghosts. They spread misinformation. They made their enemies doubt what was real. They didn't just defeat their foes. They made them surrender to their own fears. Doran tapped a command into his console. Send the next message. Let's see how far we can push them before they break. A single transmission echoed across the galactic network. We are watching. That was all. No threats. No demands. Just a reminder. A chilling, simple statement that sent a ripple of terror through the War Council chambers of every alien species. And across the galaxy, admirals and warlords, beings who had never feared anything before, began to wonder, what happens when the humans stop playing games, and start fighting for real, the Galactic War Council was in disarray. Reports flooded in from every front, admirals, warlords, and high commanders all saying the same thing. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were surviving the impossible. The most recent case was the worst of all. An entire human squadron had been stranded behind enemy lines. Cut off. No reinforcements. No escape. Every military doctrine in the galaxy agreed they should have been wiped out within days. But that's not what happened. Instead, the reports were clear. The humans weren't just surviving. They were winning. Admiral Zal Thuan leaned over the holographic war map, his claws tightening against the console. His fleet had cornered the human forces at a desolate moon in the Karsak system. A perfect trap. And yet, somehow, the humans had turned it against him. They don't have supply lines, his second-in-command growled. They don't have reinforcements. How are they still fighting? Zal Thuan didn't answer. He just watched the battle unfold in horror. The humans had adapted again. Instead of waiting to be wiped out, they had done something no logical species would ever consider. They had gone on the offensive. From the moment they were stranded, they stopped playing defense. They raided supply convoys, hijacked alien warships, and turned enemy weapons against their own fleet. The trapped human soldiers weren't scavengers. They were predators. And now, Zal Thuan's fleet, the hunters, were the ones being hunted. Deep within the war-torn Karsak system, Captain Doran crouched inside a captured alien command post, his uniform stained with battle grime. His soldiers were battered, exhausted, but still very much alive. Lieutenant Wren knelt beside him, studying the stolen enemy map. "Sir, we've got their supply routes mapped out. If we hit them here and here," he pointed at two key locations. Doran grinned. "They'll collapse from within before they ever reach us." The lieutenant exhaled sharply. "I still don't understand how we're even still standing. By all rights, we should have been eliminated days ago." Doran shrugged. "That's because they don't understand us." Wren frowned. "Sir?" Doran gestured to the ruins of the alien base around them. "The enemy fights for conquest. They fight to expand their empire. But humans? We fight differently." He picked up an alien communicator, broadcasting a message to their enemies. "You think we're cornered? You think we're weak? No. You're in our world now. And we never stop fighting." The transmission ended. Doran turned to his men, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "They want us to surrender?" He let out a quiet chuckle. "They don't know who they're dealing with." The Galactic War Council received the message and fell into a stunned silence. No species had ever fought like this. No species had ever turned certain death into a strategy for victory. And for the first time, the warlords of the galaxy faced a terrifying realization: the humans couldn't be broken. Because no matter how many times they were trapped, cornered, or outgunned, they would always find a way to win. The galaxy had seen countless wars. Empires had risen and fallen. Fleets had been destroyed, planets reduced to ashes. But never had the War Council witnessed anything like this. The humans had survived every trap, every assault, and every attempt to crush them. And now, they were pushing forward. The largest alien coalition in history had assembled. Every major faction, every warlord, every empire had put aside their differences for one reason: to stop the humans before it was too late. A force of over 10,000 warships gathered at the edge of human space, a display of overwhelming power. The aliens knew this would be the final battle. The War Council issued their ultimatum: surrender now, or be eradicated. The humans had one response: "You wanted war? We'll show you war." Admiral Zal Thuan sat aboard the Dread Mother, the flagship of the largest armada ever assembled. His command deck was silent, every officer watching the view screens with growing unease. The human fleet had arrived. And they were smiling. Zalthuan's mandibles twitched. Why do they always do that? He muttered. His second-in-command hesitated. Sir? The humans. They smiled before battle. It was disturbing. The aliens had studied human expressions, but that smile? It wasn't fear. It wasn't bravado. It was something else. Something that made even the most ruthless warlords feel a cold chill deep in their bones. A transmission came through from the human flagship. Captain Doran appeared, his face calm, almost amused. You think this is the final battle? Doran said, leaning forward. You think this is where it ends? Silence. Doran's smile widened. You still don't get it, do you? He said softly. This was never a war about planets. This was never a war about conquest. You've spent centuries fighting for power, for dominance. And that's why you'll never understand. Zalthuan leaned closer to the screen. Then what is this about? Doran's eyes darkened. This is about proving a point. And with those words, the battle began. The first wave of the alien fleet surged forward, weapons charging, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Then, within seconds, everything fell apart. The humans didn't engage them head-on. Instead, they disappeared. Entire squadrons of human ships vanished from enemy sensors, reappearing in impossible locations. They moved in ways that defied every military doctrine. Alien formations crumbled. Communications collapsed. Fleets turned against themselves in the chaos. Zalthuan watched in horror. The humans had been planning this. Luring them here. And now, the galaxy's greatest armada was being torn apart from the inside. It wasn't just strategy. It wasn't just superior tactics. It was something far worse. It was evolution. The humans had adapted to every war doctrine, every alien strategy, and now, they were rewriting the rules of war itself. The Galactic War Council had one final, desperate question: what happens when an unstoppable force is no longer trying to win, but trying to make sure you never fight them again? Zalthuan's command deck descended into chaos. His officers shouted conflicting orders, his fleet crumbling faster than he could react. Then, one final transmission came through. Doran's face appeared again, calm, collected. This is your last chance, he said. Surrender now, or we'll show you what we've really been holding back. Zalthuan's breath caught in his throat. They were still holding back? His hands shook as he gave the order. Cease fire. Surrender to the humans. And with those words, the war changed forever. The war should have ended with the last battle. The galaxy had thrown everything it had at humanity. Every warship, every fleet, every strategy refined over thousands of years. And yet, the humans had not only survived, but turned the war in their favor. But what terrified the Galactic War Council most was that the humans had never been fighting to win. They had been fighting to change the war itself. Admiral Zalthuan sat in his war chamber, staring blankly at the battle reports. His mind struggled to process the reality in front of him. Entire fleets had been crippled, not destroyed, but disabled. Human forces had deliberately left ships intact, leaving alien commanders stranded and forced to retreat. And worst of all? Factions were beginning to turn against each other. The humans hadn't conquered any planets. They hadn't demanded surrender. Instead, they had exposed every weakness in the galactic war machine. Alien generals whispered among themselves. Some of them had already begun sending messages to the humans, not as enemies, but as potential allies. Zalthuan clenched his claws. This was their true strategy all along. Humans weren't fighting to win a war. They were fighting to end war itself. Aboard the UNS Resolute, Captain Doran watched the latest intelligence reports with a smirk. Lieutenant Rand leaned against the console. You think they're ready to break? Doran nodded. They were ready the moment they realized we weren't playing their game. Humans had studied war for thousands of years. And they had learned one truth that the rest of the galaxy had never understood. You don't win wars by fighting them. You win by making them impossible to fight. The galactic warlords had been so focused on battle tactics, ship designs, and strategic maneuvers that they had never considered what happened when the very nature of warfare changed. Doran turned to his officers. Begin the next phase. Ren frowned. Are we actually going through with it? Doran's smirk deepened. Of course. It's time they understood what real power looks like. The Galactic War Council was already falling apart when the human transmission arrived. A simple message. A single offer. You don't need to fear us. You just need to choose. And with that, the galaxy was left with an impossible decision. Would they cling to their old ways, fighting an unwinnable war? Or would they do the one thing no empire had ever considered before? Would they accept the humans' vision of the future? A future where war was no longer an option. A future where the strongest empires weren't the ones with the biggest fleets, but the ones willing to adapt. For the first time in history, the war wasn't ending with conquest. It was ending with a choice. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic War Council had faced many crises over the centuries, rebellions, invasions, even the destruction of entire empires. But nothing compared to this. This was not just the end of a war. This was the collapse of everything they had ever believed about power. The humans had won, and yet, they had taken no territory. They had made no demands for tribute, no ultimatums of surrender. Instead, they had given the most terrifying command of all: choose. Choose between the old ways of endless war, or something new. Something unstoppable. Something the warlords of the galaxy could not control. Admiral Zalthuan sat in stunned silence in the war chamber, his claws twitching. Around him, the other warlords argued in panicked voices. We cannot surrender. It would mean the end of everything we've built. Then what do you propose? We've thrown everything at them. And they're still here. Their fleet should be in ruins. Then why, Zalthuan finally growled, his voice low, are we the ones surrendering? Silence fell over the chamber. Because they all knew the answer. The humans had already won. Not through superior firepower, but through sheer inevitability. They had changed the way wars were fought. And now, the only choice left was to either join them, or be left behind. Aboard the UNS Resolute, Captain Doran watched the latest transmissions from the alien factions. Lieutenant Wren frowned as he read through them. The first major empires are already shifting. Some have agreed to peace negotiations. Others are trying to form new alliances, with us. Doran chuckled. And the warlords? Wren smirked. They're panicking. They know they've lost, but they're too proud to admit it. Doran leaned back in his chair. They'll come around. Wren hesitated. And if they don't? Doran's expression darkened. Then they'll be left behind. The galaxy is moving forward, whether they like it or not. This war had never been about defeating the enemy. It had been about forcing them to evolve. Humans weren't interested in ruling the galaxy. They were interested in remaking it. And that was what terrified the old powers most of all. The final surrender didn't come in a dramatic battle. There was no grand treaty, no formal ceremony. The war simply stopped. Not because the humans had wiped out their enemies, but because the warlords finally understood the truth. They had been fighting for power. But the humans had been fighting for something greater. They had been fighting for change. And in the end, change was the one thing no empire could stop. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy chose peace. But there was still one final question left unanswered. What did the humans really want? And when the warlords finally asked, Captain Doran's response sent chills through every being in the universe. We wanted you to understand what we already knew. War was never about winning. It was about making sure you never had to fight again. The galaxy had changed. For the first time in recorded history, the great empires of the cosmos were not at war. Not because they had been conquered. Not because they had been destroyed. But because they had finally learned the one lesson the humans had been teaching them all along: war is not power. War is failure. Admiral Zalthuan sat in his now empty war chamber. The once great Galactic War Council had disbanded. No more warlords. No more conquests. Only uncertainty. He watched the final reports come in, entire factions dismantling their war fleets, shifting their focus toward diplomacy and trade. Old enemies becoming allies. And at the heart of it all? The humans. Zalthuan had spent his life believing that only the strong survived. That war was the natural state of the universe. But the humans had never believed that. And because of them, the galaxy had been forced to evolve. A transmission appeared on his console. Captain Doran. The face of the species that had rewritten history. Zalthuan hesitated before opening the channel. "So, this is it," he said. "You've won." Doran gave a small, almost amused smile. "We never wanted to win. That was your mistake." Zalthuan exhaled slowly. "Then tell me, what do humans want?" Doran's expression softened. "We wanted to survive. Just like you. But we realized something a long time ago." He leaned forward, his voice steady, unwavering. "The only war worth fighting is the war against war itself." Zalthuan felt a chill run through him. Not from fear. But from understanding. Across the galaxy, new alliances were formed. Fleets that once waged destruction now patrolled the stars, keeping peace instead of enforcing war. Empires that had ruled with iron fists now sought diplomacy first. The old ways were gone. And the new era had begun. All because humanity had refused to fight for the sake of power. They had fought to make sure no one ever had to fight again. As Captain Doran stood aboard the UNS Resolute, watching the galaxy change before his eyes, Lieutenant Wren spoke quietly beside him. "You really think this will last?" Doran exhaled. "Maybe not forever. But we've given them a choice." He turned, his gaze distant. "And as long as humanity is here, we'll remind them of what's at stake." Wren nodded. "And if they forget?" Doran smirked. "Then we remind them why the galaxy trembled when humans entered the war." He turned away, watching the stars. Because humanity had never fought for conquest. They fought to prove that war was a choice. And in the end, the galaxy had chosen something better. Peace,